I don't think about that night often. In fact, I try not to think about it at all. But sometimes when I'm driving down an empty road at night, I catch myself checking the gas gauge, making sure it's not low, making sure I won't need to stop. Because I never want to end up in a place like that again. This happened 3 years ago. I was driving from Denver to Kansas City, just me, my car, and an overnight bag. I left late in the evening, which in hindsight was stupid. I should have just waited until morning. But I wanted to get home, and the 6-hour drive didn't seem too bad at the time. It was close to midnight when my gas light came on. I wasn't too worried at first. I was on a long, empty highway, but there had been plenty of small towns along the way. There had to be a gas station nearby. A few miles later, I saw an old, faded green sign on the side of the road. Harlow, 10 miles. Harlow. Never heard of it, but 10 miles wasn't far. I took the exit. The road into town was narrow and cracked, barely wide enough for 2 cars. Tall trees lined both sides, their branches stretching over the road like a tunnel. There were no other cars, no streetlights, just my headlights cutting through the dark. I should have turned around. But I didn't, because up ahead, I saw lights, a small town, and a gas station. The gas station looked like something out of a different decade, an old brick building with a flickering neon sign. There was a single pump out front, one of those ancient-looking ones without a card reader. I pulled in and parked. The place was completely silent. No cars, no people. Even the houses further down the road were dark. It was like the whole town had gone to sleep years ago. I got out and tried the pump. Nothing. Great. I sighed and headed inside. A bell jingled as I pushed open the door. Inside, the place smelled like dust and stale coffee. The shelves were half-stocked, mostly with old-looking snacks and off-brand soda. A small TV behind the counter was playing some static-filled infomercial. And then I noticed the guy at the register. He was just standing there, perfectly still. Middle-aged, wiry, with deep lines on his face. His eyes were locked on me before I even said a word. Hey, I said. Your pump isn't working. He blinked, slow and deliberate before answering. Cash only. I hesitated. That wasn't really a problem. I had some cash in my wallet, but something about the way he said it put me on edge. His tone was flat. Not annoyed, not impatient, just empty. Like he had said those same 2 words 1,000 times before. Still, I needed gas. I pulled out a 20 and set it on the counter. He didn't take it right away, just stared at me for a second longer than was normal, then finally reached out, slow and deliberate. You just passing through? He asked. Yeah, I said, driving to Kansas City. He nodded, but it didn't feel like he was actually listening. He just turned, opened the register and shoved the bill inside without counting the change. Then, just as I turned to leave, he said something that made my stomach drop. You should keep driving. I stopped, turned back. What? He didn't look at me, just stared at the register like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. Town's quiet this time of night, he muttered. Not much here for you. I didn't know what to say to that. I gave a stiff nod and headed back outside, feeling a little more uneasy than before. And that's when I saw the other car, parked at the far end of the lot, with someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching me. I stopped mid-step, my pulse picking up. The car was an old sedan, something from the 90s, sitting under the dim yellow glow of a busted street lamp. The headlights were off. The engine wasn't running. But the driver was staring right at me. I couldn't make out their face. Not completely. Just the shape of a person sitting stiff in the driver's seat, motionless. For a second, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were just another late-night traveler stopping for gas like me. But the longer I stood there, the more certain I was that they weren't moving at all, not checking their phone, not adjusting their seat, not even blinking, just watching. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I turned back to the pump, forcing myself to move casually like I hadn't noticed. I lifted the nozzle, stuck it in the tank, and pressed the handle. Nothing. The pump wasn't working. I glanced over my shoulder at the station window. The old man behind the counter was still watching me too. And now, he was smiling. My mouth went dry. I pressed the handle on the pump again, harder this time. Still nothing. Slowly, I turned back toward the station. The old man hadn't moved. He was still standing behind the counter, still watching me, still smiling, like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. I could feel my heart pounding now. My body was telling me to leave, but I still needed gas. I was running on fumes. I didn't have enough to make it to the next town. I forced myself to walk back to the door, casual, normal. I pushed it open. The bell jingled again, too loud in the silence. "Pump's not working," I said. The old man just kept smiling. I cleared my throat. Is there another one in town?" His eyes flickered just for a second like he was thinking about something. Then in that same slow, deliberate voice, he said, "No, this is the only one." I swallowed hard. "All right, can you turn it on?" His smile faltered, just a little. Then he let out a slow breath. "Go on back out there," he said. "I'll take care of it." I hesitated. Something about the way he said that sent every instinct in my body screaming, but I didn't know what else to do. So I turned, glancing just for a second at the window. The car in the lot? The driver's door was open now, and the person inside was gone. I didn't waste a second. I got in my car and locked the doors. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. And in my rearview mirror, I finally saw it. A figure standing behind my car. Tall, still, head slightly tilted, watching me leave. I didn't look back again. I just drove, and I never looked for that town again. I don't believe in fate, or destiny, or any of that meant-to-be crap, but I have no other way to explain what happened to me. This was about a year ago. I was living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, sick of the city, sick of the noise, and looking for a place of my own. I wasn't rich or anything, but I had saved up enough to finally get out. One day, while scrolling through listings online, I found a house for rent in a small town I'd never heard of. The price was low, way lower than it should have been for a whole house. The description was simple. 2-bed, 1 bath, fully furnished, available immediately. I should have been suspicious, but I wasn't. Because when I clicked through the photos, I felt something weird. The layout, the furniture, even the little details, it all looked familiar. Like I had seen it before. Like the house was already mine. And for some reason, I couldn't stop looking at it. I told myself I was just being stupid. It was just a house, a cheap rental in some random town. Nothing weird about it. So, without thinking too hard, I sent an inquiry. The landlord replied almost immediately. No background check, no long application process. Just a short email back. "You can move in this weekend. The key will be under the mat." That should have been my second red flag, but I didn't question it. I was too caught up in the idea of finally having my own space. So that Saturday, I packed up my car and drove to the town. It was smaller than I expected, really small. No big stores, no busy streets, just a handful of old buildings, a diner, a gas station, and a few rows of houses. And there, at the end of a quiet street, was mine. It was exactly like the photos. Exactly. Same pale blue paint, same porch swing, even the same cracked stepping stones leading to the front door. I got out of the car, feeling that same weird sense of familiarity. Like I had been here before. Like the house was waiting for me. I shook the feeling off. I was just tired. That's what I told myself. Moving is stressful. Of course, things felt a little strange. I grabbed my bags and walked up to the front door. Sure enough, the key was right there under the mat. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and flicked on the lights. The house was perfect. Not fancy, not new, but lived in. Cozy. The furniture was clean, but not brand new. The kitchen had plates in the cabinets, silverware in the drawers. Even the fridge had a few bottles of water inside. It was like someone had been here just yesterday. I set my bags down in the living room and walked through the house, checking everything out. The bedroom already had a bed made up. The bathroom had a fresh bar of soap by the sink. The weirdest part? Everything felt like it was mine. The couch was exactly the kind I would have picked. The coffee maker was the same model I had in my apartment. Even the books on the shelf were titles I had already read. I tried to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. It was just a coincidence. It had to be. But then I got to the bedroom closet. I slid the door open and froze. Because hanging inside, neatly on the rack, were clothes in my exact size. I stood there, just staring. A row of shirts, jackets, even a couple of pairs of jeans, all in my size. I reached out and touched one of the jackets. The fabric was worn in, soft, like it had been used for years, like it had been mine. A cold feeling crept up my spine. This wasn't normal, I knew that. But I still tried to reason with myself. Maybe the landlord had left stuff behind. Maybe the last tenant was a similar build. Maybe this was just a weird coincidence. Yeah, that had to be it. Still, my stomach felt tight as I backed out of the closet and shut the door. I needed air. I went outside and sat on the porch trying to shake off the unease. The street was quiet, too quiet. No cars, no people, not even a dog barking in the distance. Just rows of houses, all dark. I was about to go back inside when I noticed something. Across the street, one of the houses had a window facing mine, and someone was standing behind the curtain, not moving, just watching. I froze. At first, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The figure was just a shadow behind the curtain, barely visible in the dim light. But as I sat there, not moving, I realized they weren't moving either. Whoever it was, they were just standing there, watching me. I felt my pulse in my throat. I wasn't in the mood for weird neighbors, not on my first night. So, trying to act like I wasn't freaked out, I stood up, stretched, and went back inside. I locked the door behind me. The house suddenly felt different, less cozy, more foreign. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just tired. A long drive, a big move, it was messing with my head. I needed to eat something, take a shower, and go to bed. But as I walked past the living room window, I made the mistake of glancing outside. The curtain across the street was wide open, and the figure was gone. I shut the blinds. Fast. I needed to go to bed. Just sleep this feeling off. I turned off the lights and headed for the bedroom. And then, I heard a floorboard creak from inside the house. I stopped mid-step. The sound had come from down the hall, near the guest bedroom. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then, the door handle turned, the lock rattled. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, trying to breathe, trying to think. Then the voice came. You shouldn't lock doors in your own house. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The footsteps moved away, soft, slow. I listened until I couldn't hear them anymore. I stayed awake until the sun came up. Then I left. There's something strange about going back to your hometown after years away. Things look the same, but they feel different. Like they've been frozen in time, waiting for you to return. That's how it felt when I drove back to Pine Hollow last winter. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager. I never really planned on coming back at all, but after my mom passed, I had to return to handle the house, sort through her things. I figured I'd be in and out in a few days. But on my first night back, I found myself standing at the edge of Silver Lake, the place we were never allowed to skate. The ice was thick, untouched, stretching across the water like glass. And for the first time in years, I remembered the stories, the warnings from my parents, the way everyone avoided this lake in the winter. I never knew why. But as I stared out across that frozen expanse, something caught my eye. A shape beneath the ice. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light. The moon was full that night, casting a cold glow over the ice. The shape was faint, blurry, probably a branch or some rocks. That's what I told myself. But as I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't. The shape was human. I stopped at the edge of the lake, my breath fogging in the freezing air. My stomach twisted as I stared down at the figure beneath the ice. It was a boy. His face was pale, pressed against the underside of the ice, his eyes open and staring straight up at me. His clothes were old, tattered, like something from another time. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the frozen ground. My heart was racing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Then something else hit me, a sick, cold realization. I recognized him. Not completely. His face was blurry, half obscured by the frost, but there was something familiar about him, something I couldn't place. I stood there, frozen. It didn't make sense. I didn't know him. I couldn't have. But something deep in my gut told me otherwise, told me I had seen that face before. I forced myself to move, stepping closer to the ice. My pulse was hammering as I crouched down, breath fogging against the surface. His eyes, they were still open, still staring straight at me. I felt something deep in my chest, an old buried instinct, a memory that wasn't quite there, just out of reach. I needed to know who he was. The ice was thick, solid, but my hands moved on their own, wiping away the frost, clearing the surface, revealing more of his face. And then I saw it. A scar, just above his eyebrow. Small, faint, but distinct. I had the same one. I knew because I had gotten it when I was 6 years old, from falling on the ice. My breath caught in my throat. I reached up almost without thinking and ran my fingers over my forehead, over the same scar, the one I'd had my whole life. I stared down at the boy under the ice, my vision blurring with cold and panic. This wasn't possible. The scar, the shape of his face, it was me. Or at least, it looked like me. I stumbled backward, my boots skidding on the frozen shoreline. My chest was tight, my breath coming too fast. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining it, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but his eyes moved, only slightly. Just the faintest flicker, like a muscle twitching. But I saw it. I swear to God I saw it. I didn't think. I just ran. I ran like something was chasing me, even though I knew that wasn't possible. The ice was solid, thick enough to hold a truck, and that thing, that boy, was trapped beneath it. But I didn't stop running. By the time I reached my mom's old house, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I shoved the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and stood there in the dark trying to breathe. It had to be a coincidence. Some kid drowned here years ago. Looked a little like me, that's all. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I couldn't. Because the second I caught my breath, I turned on the lights and went straight for the old family photo albums. I didn't even know what I was looking for, just that I had to find something. And then I did. A picture from when I was maybe 5. Me, standing next to the lake. And beside me, a boy who looked exactly like me. Same hair, same clothes, but I had no memory of him. And written in my mother's handwriting at the bottom of the photo, Lucas and Ben, Silver Lake, winter '93. I don't have a brother. I stared at the name. Ben. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like I had never said it before. But if my mom had written it, that meant I had a twin, and I had no memory of him. My hands were trembling as I flipped through the album searching for more. There were only a handful of pictures, each one showing the two of us together, always by the lake. But something was off. The photos stopped after 1993. There were plenty of pictures of me growing up after that, birthdays, school photos, family gatherings, but Ben, it was like he had never existed. I felt dizzy. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and called my aunt, my mom's sister. She was the only family I had left. She picked up after a few rings, her voice groggy. "Lucas, do you have any idea what time it is?" My throat was dry. "Did I have a brother?" Silence. Then a long, slow inhale. "Lucas, you need to leave that town." My stomach twisted. "What?" I said. "You shouldn't have gone back there," my aunt whispered. Her voice had changed, not groggy anymore, just afraid. "Pack your things, get in your car, and leave, tonight." My skin went cold. "Just tell me the truth." Another pause. Then finally she said it. "You did have a brother. His name was Ben. But you weren't supposed to remember him." I gripped the phone tighter. "Why?" She exhaled shakily. "Because Ben died, Lucas." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air pressing in on me. "How?" She hesitated. "Then, they pulled one of you out." My breath stopped. They weren't sure which one. I thought of the eyes staring up at me from beneath the frozen lake, and for the first time I realized maybe I wasn't supposed to leave him there.